Is this why there's no Corona in Fate of the Furious? Over the course of 16 years and 8 installments, the Fast and Furious franchise has had to survive a lot of changes. Whether it was the fictional death of characters like Giselle, Gal Gadot, and Han, Sung Kang, the fan-inspired resurrection of Michelle Rodriguez's Letty, or the very real, heartbreaking, and technically challenging loss of Paul Walker as Brian O'Connor, the series has not only survived, but also thrived. And while it makes sense that both Walker and his character's partner, Jordana Brewster, would be absent from the latest installment, The Fate of the Furious, there's another much more bafflingly absent member of the family. Corona, the officially unofficial beer of the Fast franchise, has been mysteriously replaced without explanation by Budweiser and Stella Artois. I guess the theme of The Fate of the Furious really is betrayal. For those unfamiliar with the fabled lore of Dominic Toretto, Vin Diesel, and his car-loving family, it's difficult to calculate exactly what Corona has meant to the franchise. Though a few have tried. Some suspect the beer's presence is a nod to the film that inspired the Fast franchise, Point Break. Others have attributed the huge 2015 boom in Corona sales to its prominent placement in both the action of Furious 7 and the film's emotional tribute to Paul Walker. But whether or not we can accurately measure diesel sip to Corona sale ratio, this brand has almost always been the fast beverage of choice and was most famously referenced in the original film as Dom first welcomes Brian into his home. The beer was noticeably absent from the second and third Dom-less installments of the franchise. He only shows up briefly at the end of Tokyo Drift. It may not be a coincidence that those installments were the weakest of the franchise. But the Anheuser-Busch owned beer was back with a vengeance in 2009's Fast and Furious. Dom and Brian sipped uneasily from their respective Coronas while reconciling after a 5-year separation. The Corona is missing from the fifth film, set in Brazil, but roars back into the picture again in 2013's Fast and Furious 6. Corona bottles litter the table of the Toretto family barbecue that closes out the film, as Han sips mournfully, thinking on the loss of Giselle and planning out his own doom with a fateful trip to Tokyo. The beer got perhaps its most prominent placement of all in 2015's Furious 7 as Kurt Russell's Mr. Nobody has a branded bucket of the stuff on hand in order to entice a reluctant Dom, who refers to himself here as a Corona man, to join him on a mission. Believe it or not, according to franchise producer Neil Moritz, Corona has never paid a thin dime for its placement in the Fast franchise. Though other brands, like Dodge, have more traditional arrangement with the franchise, the inclusion of Corona has simply been a matter of taste. We love Corona, Moritz said on a recent episode of Bill Simmons's podcast. Corona is the official beer of Fast and Furious. Unpaid. Unpaid. Simmons responded incredulously. You've done like hundreds of millions of dollars of advertising for them. Moritz admitted, I know it's crazy. So perhaps we have the bottom line to blame for Corona's absence from the Fate of the Furious. Did Bud just make the franchise an offer it couldn't refuse? But given that Budweiser, Stella Artois, and Corona are all owned by Anheuser-Busch, it's hard to imagine why one subsidiary would supplant the other. Whatever the reason, Universal declined to comment. It's red and white metal bottles of Budweiser and green bottles of Stella that Toretto and company swigged down this time over some barbecue. Despite the emotional catharsis on display at the end of Fate, the family bonding just wasn't quite the same.